Is this Mark Levin, the famous best-selling author?
Wait a minute. Let me look. Yes, it is. How are you?
Well, I have a bone to pick with you. The term limits idea, that was my idea. Now you're making an amendment out of it. I was supposed to do that.
I'm all for it. Whatever you want. You know, any way we can do it. By the way, where are you calling me from?
Well, you know what I've figured out is that the guys in Washington, I have a bill to do it. They're not too interested in limiting their own terms. So I think we may have to do it through the state legislatures.
Isn't it amazing they're not willing to limit anything they do, as far as I can tell?
Yeah, they're not willing to limit their own spending. They're not willing to read the bills, and they're not willing to limit their own terms. All big surprises, right?
Amen. Now, Senator, where are you calling me from? I'm just curious.
I'm in South Carolina.
Aren't you from Kentucky? I think you're from Kentucky.
I am, but they asked me to come down and judge whose barbecue is better, South Carolina or Kentucky. And, you know, I would have to be honest to tell you it was a dead tie. That's not a good political answer.
Yes, I'll tell you what, though, I can eat it all right now. I'm very hungry. So you're in South Carolina. Look, I don't think it's any secret, and I'm not going to play games, will it confirm or not. You're spending a lot of time in South Carolina and Iowa. You ran up to New Hampshire. Do you think this is doable should you choose to run for president?
You know, I think that our Republican Party needs to, what I've said is evolve, adapt, or die. We have to have something that transforms the party back into a national party, and it has to be somebody who believes in the core message, but also takes that core message and doesn't dilute it, but makes it appealing and talks about things of limited government, parts of limited government, such as the right to privacy, that are appealing to new people that we can bring into the party.
Mm-hmm. And in bringing new people into the party, let me ask you this. I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but the Republican Party bureaucracy, what does this bureaucracy stand for? For the life of me, I have no idea.
Well, I think parties are always who comprise them, so it's who becomes the leaders in a party, and there's always a jockeying back and forth for what direction the party takes, and that's part of what I'm trying to do over the next year as I do travel, and some of it is going to early primary states, but is traveling across the U.S. to try to talk about how we do grow the party. I mean, one of the big issues I think we can grow the party with is school choice, that we are the party for educational change. We're the party that will help inner-city kids who are being left behind by crummy schools and crummy education, and they will bring competition and excellence, charter schools, public, private choice, all of the above to try to fix what is a horribly broken system.
You're so right about that, and if you and others are consistent and outspoken on this and not just, and I know you're not because we've talked, off the air, and not just, Johnny one note, I think it can make a difference because even today the so-called Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department has stepped into Louisiana's situation there where Governor Jindal is trying to open up school vouchers to more and more poor kids, mostly minority in some of these cities, and they're being attacked by our federal government.
Yeah, and that's going to backfire on them because what they're going to discover is the Democrats want the status quo. They don't care, what happens to the kids in the inner city. I truly believe that. The ticket out of the inner city, the ticket out of poverty is education. And people keep saying, oh, no, it's poverty. You got to get rid of poverty before you can educate people. No, you get rid of poverty by educating people. And, just look back at, you remember the movie Stand and Deliver and Jaime Escalante? When you look back at that, he went to an area of poor Hispanic kids who even the Hispanic teacher said, these kids are illiterate and they can't learn, and he taught them calculus. He didn't make them rich. He just went in and said, these are hungry minds, and he fed them, and poor kids can learn, and I think the Democrats have really just taken that for granted and haven't really tried.
When does this Obamacare confrontation come up on the continuing resolution? Do you know?
It'll come up when we get back. I'm not sure if it's going to be within September or early October, but it'll come back in the first month. And I think it's foolish if we don't stand up and fight for what we believe in. The problem is you have no leverage if the Republicans announce preemptive surrender and people up there say, oh, we're not voting for this because we're afraid. Well, that defeats the plan to begin with. So we do need to stand up, and there have been several of us saying we shouldn't fund it. We shouldn't fund Obamacare. If it's bad policy, why vote to fund it?
Isn't your biggest problem right now exactly what you're saying, that, about two-thirds or more of the Republicans in the Senate and in the House, maybe less so, have already surrendered, and they keep talking a good game, but they obviously keep moving the bar. I mean, if we're not going to fight it here, then the debt ceiling. Now, you know damn well they're not going to do it on the debt ceiling either if they're not going to do it here.
They've already capitulated, earlier on this year on the debt ceiling. But look back at the gunfight. Look back at the gunfight, and everybody said, "Oh, you guys are you Second Amendment people. You're never going to be able to do anything." We ended up winning the battle on that. I think we won the hearts and minds of people as people began to discover that really, if you want to protect kids in schools, it may well mean that you need some kind of protection there, some kind of self-defense would be maybe one of the ways we ought to think about it. We ended up winning that battle. Also, if you go back to the debt ceiling battle in 2011, we stood up and fought to attach budgetary reform, and the sequester I didn't think was even good enough, but the sequester did get attached because we stood up and fought when everybody else wanted to give in from the beginning.
I often wonder why the Republican establishment ignores these victories and doesn't learn from these lessons, whether it's Reagan and his two massive landslides, speaking as conservative as any conservative candidate has ever running for president, whether it's the NRA and others fighting, as you point out, on the attacks on the Second Amendment. I mean, weakness, whether it's military or whether it is politics, you show weakness, and your opponents are going to take advantage of that, are they not?
I think there are two strategies for how you grow the Republican Party. One is you make it Democrat light, we dilute our message, we become just a little bit less than what Democrats are, and hope that we can grow a party that way. It won't work. It's been tried, and I'm absolutely against that. The other way is we stick to our core beliefs, but we become better at articulating the message. For example, our message is more difficult. Our message is one of opportunity. It's one of the American dream, and it is not something tangible. We're not the party that wants to give you another cell phone. We're the party that wants to give you the opportunity to enter the middle class in a meaningful way with a meaningful job. But we have to convince people that we are sincere about it, that we're not the party of the rich. We're not the party of rich white folks. We are the party that's going to offer that opportunity to everybody, no matter where you come from, what your race, your color, or your creed.
It's interesting because liberty is easier to understand and explain, and it is more tangible when you're living in a tyranny. And yet, when you're living in a nation that is transitioning, or as Obama says, fundamentally transforming, it is a little more complicated, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think we do have to have a transformation, but not in the direction that President Obama is taking us. Really, we need a transformational candidate or leaders within the Republican Party that really go about explaining to people who haven't been coming our way, African Americans, Hispanics, Jewish Americans, Asian Americans, any sort of slash Americans ethnic group, we need to explain to them that we are the party of justice. We're the party of Bill of Rights. When people talk about indefinitely detaining people without a trial, we're the party that stands up and says, remember what happened to the Japanese Americans in World War II, and that was awful. Remember what happened to black Americans in 1920, 1910, 1915, and that was awful. And that we're the party who will stand up and say, we are the party of justice and the Bill of Rights. When we do that, I think all of a sudden you're going to find people who say, well, you know what, the Democrats have taken our vote for granted, and they aren't doing anything for us. They're not doing anything to protect us from blacks being incarcerated at 5 to 6 times the rates of whites for nonviolent drug crimes. What are the Democrats doing to help us? So I think when we get some libertarian-leaning Republicans who say, you know what, maybe we need to reassess putting people in jail for long terms for nonviolent crimes and taking away people's voting rights for these youthful indiscretions, I think that maybe we could become the party that does protect minority rights better than the Democrats do.
All right, Rand Paul, as you are in South Carolina, I bet you're doing more than eating barbecue, but that's just a thought. It's always a pleasure, and I want people to know you're a really good guy in person, too. You're just a nice guy. You're very accessible, and I wish you well on the road there.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me on.
All right, take care. All right, there's Rand Paul, senator from Kentucky. Man's got ideas. Man's got enormous energy. I think he's such an incredible attribute to the Republican Party, which is why he's trashed like Ted Cruz and the others. You don't have to agree with every single thing. Who does that? I think he's a breath of fresh air, like these other young Turks, quite frankly. I'm glad he's in the Republican Party.